Good morning and welcome to Eduscope. I remain your anchor, Dr. Iroro Stephen Izu, and today we're going to be looking at a very interesting topic. A very interesting topic because this topic, has direct bearing on the lives of the average Nigerian, in this country. And what is this topic? The topic is simply the eight-point agenda of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. Now, we know that he has spent about a little bit more than 100 days in office, and he has, within this period of time, appointed his ministers. And within this period of time, he has read out, what is during, of course, and the eight priority areas, which are going to serve as the yardstick, by which we are going to adjudge the efficacy, the effectiveness, or otherwise of his administration. They are going to serve as a barometer, with which we are going to measure the level of success or failure of his administration. You recall that the immediate past administration could not give us any roadmap for a long period of time. For a long period of time. So that administration didn't come, hitting the ground running. It took the administration over about 6 months to even appoint ministers. And so at the time, the ex-president called ministers noisemakers. In other words, they were not even important. So we must give kudos, to the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for hitting the ground running, appointing this minister within this period of time, and giving us, a roadmap, a compass, an idea of what he wants to achieve, and with this, we are going to hold him accountable, for either accomplishing them or not accomplishing them. So these eight priority areas, are very, very fantastic, and they are very, it's very, very germane for us to, try to examine them. Now, it will interest to note that this eight-point agenda, these 8 points or eight priority areas, they are not anything extraterrestrial or they are not extraordinary. They are normal things. They are not novel. They are normal day-to-day, challenges that Nigerians are faced with. Because you must understand the fact that Nigerians of today are faced with a lot of difficulties, a lot of situations that border on hardship, on anguish, on agony, circumstances that are becoming too tortuous, too overwhelming for any single citizen to bear across the world. But Nigerians, are very hopeful people. They are very hopeful people. They are very, they are people who don't easily give up hope. So that is what is driving, Nigerians, even in the face of the most deadly, the most disastrous, the most torturous, administration. So these eight priority areas, they are areas that should rejig the confidence of Nigerians in government, or reduce that confidence in government. We must understand the fact that across Africa, there's a rising tide, as we discussed yesterday. There's a rising tide of military coups in Africa. One of the causes of these coups is failure of governance. Failure of governance. Governance is the work of government. So the for the Bola Ahmed Tinubu's ability not to be seen to have failed, it must, try to accomplish this agenda that it has by its own self, uncompared, read out, for Nigerians. What are these eight priority areas? The first one is food security. Food security. Nigeria has been named, the headquarters of poverty, across the world. One of the indices used to measure, used to label a country as the headquarters of poverty is because of food insecurity. Food insecurity, shortages in food, scarcity, of basic food, to the ordinary, Nigerians. If you look at the country now, the cost of living, has skyrocketed. There's a geometric hike, in the prices of basic items in the market. Basic item in the market. So you now see that food security is a very, very important, item for the Tinubu's administration to beam its searchlight on. The second one, it says it's going to achieve is poverty eradication. This is a very tall order, because there's no country where poverty has been completely eradicated. You must still see some people who are poor. It is not the dimension or the degree of poverty, that matters. So but he's taking the bull by the horn. He's giving himself, a marching order that 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 is incomprehensible, that is unimaginable, to the average mind. So but of course, he has been governor before. Perhaps he has the magic wand to end poverty in Nigeria. That is the second, point on the 8 point agenda. The third one is economic growth, and job creation. Economic growth and job creation. Economic growth and job creation. Now, of course, there cannot be food security. There cannot be poverty cannot be ended, if there is no economic growth and job creation. If the economy is not robust, if the economy is not buoyant, if there is no activeness in the economic lifeline of the country, so that means there is the need, for the economy to take the turn of having a lot of industries that are working, factories that are working, companies, manufacturing plants, businesses, large, medium, and small scale companies must come come on board. So this administration has said it is going to take the bull by the horn, by engendering economic growth, that will facilitate, job creation. Of course, you see what the president did during the hunger, and even the G20 that are held in India, and of course, and America. The hunger head in America, the G20 head, in India. You see that on the sidelines, he held a series of meetings with investors, not political meetings now, but economic and commercial meetings with investors, those who whom he believe have the capital to come and invest in Nigeria, trying to tell them the reason why they should come to Nigeria, which of course he must be giving kudos for. Now, economic growth, and job creation is the one of the points on the agenda. You talk about inclusivity. Inclusivity, that means nobody's going to be left out in this government. You recall, when Buhari came on board, he said that I am for everybody, I am for nobody. But he now contradicted himself by saying that people who voted for him, 95% cannot be, equated with those who voted for him 5%, who gave him 5% vote. That itself, was the beginning of the entrenchment of nepotic inequality in his administration, talking about Buhari's administration. But now, Tinubu has said that he's going to ensure that there is inclusivity, there is inclusiveness, in his administration, meaning that women are going to be carried along, young people are going to be carried along, and so on, and so forth. He talked about improving security. Security today, I recall, some about 2 years ago or thereabouts, I was in my I and my family, we are in our apartments, apartments, in our estate. And before it was happening around close to 2 a.m., we are attacked by 15 armed robbers, and that is just a scenario. I know of many of my friends who have been attacked, in the federal capital territory. Not talk about the suburbs, talk about the villages, talk about the states, local government, and so on and so forth. Security is a priority, in Nigeria. Security of lives, and livelihoods. Lives and livelihoods. When I say livelihood, I mean, those farmers who are farming in the bushes, in the rural areas, in their, recently Boko Haram, insurgents killed, several farmers in northeast, farmers who are going to harvest their crops. So if we are going to bring about food security, if we're going to revamp or rejig the economy, of course, security is a priority that cannot be underestimated. It cannot be undermined. So now that is a very, very key, priority area. And talk about rule of law. Rule of law. If you are a student, if you are a very, very keen watcher, of the political, economic, and social development in Nigeria, especially in the last 8 years, you see that a rule of law was something that was swept under the carpet. Democracy, liberal democracy, is anchored, on rule of law, on rule of law. If there's no rule of law, that means you are talking about rule of thumb. The use of force, to accomplish anything that you want to accomplish. That itself, takes us back to that animalistic age, of the obsession tendency, where life is nasty, brutish, short, solitary, and poor. Now, Buhari talked about, and Tinubu talked about, access to capital, access to capital. Now, as one other priority areas, access to capital. Now, we live in a country where people have ideas, they have business ideas, but they cannot materialize ideas. Why? Because they don't have capital. You go to the banks, commercial banks, that also give loans to you at very low interest rate. They will call interest rate that you cannot pay. Before you even start the business, they're already calling you to refund the money. Now, he has said that there's going to be access to capital. Now, there are institutions like Bank of Industries, Bank of Agriculture, and so on and so forth. These bodies, and even the Central Bank of Nigeria, and several other government institutions, and even the commercial banks must be taxed, to give out loans, to credible, individuals who have investment ideas that can engender. See, it is not government that create jobs for any country. It's not government. It is the private sector that create jobs. But government must give the enabling environment. And one of the enabling environment is access to capital. Access to capital, low interest rate capital, loans, and so on and so forth. Not that you give somebody a loan that is too elephant. The interest rate is too the interest rate is too elephantine. It's bigger than whatever profit the person is going to make. So that is that. So now the last area let's talk about is the fight against corruption, or anti-corruption crusade. So corruption has become a malady that we have been living with. So if you say you're going to fight corruption, fight corruption. Don't fight corruption the way Sheikh Usani talked about, and the fact that President Buhari was using deodorant to fight those who are his friends, and insecticide to fight those who are his enemies. The fight against corruption must be seen as equal, impartial, must be seen as equal, impartial, fair, and just. That is when Nigerians will begin to have hope, in this EightPoint agenda. So you must understand the fact that this EightPoint agenda, if we're followed, they have the possibility of taking us from the doldrums. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been governor before. He has been senator before. And he has a wife who has been first lady before, who has been senator before. He has some very competent persons whom he has appointed, especially his chief of staff. The chief of staff was Speaker of House of Reps. The secretary of the federal government was former governor, and so on and so forth. You have a lot of ex-governors in this administration, both in the Senate, both in the the National Assembly, and in the executive council. So I want to charge these people to bring their experiences to bear on the government. Nigerians are suffering, and Nigerians cannot afford another failed government again. We cannot afford another failed government again. And we're going to hold this government accountable, by these 8 indices, these 8 priority areas that he has read out. Now, I have a little, a caveat, to these 8 priority areas. The areas that are very, very fundamental that the government didn't mention. I just hope that they are going to make these areas I'm going to mention now, as extended priority area, because they are very, very key, to any administration success, or failure. Now, one of them is, critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure. Now, this country has epileptic power supply. It's becoming paralytic power supply. Because we literally live in darkness. So the government should look into the perennial disease of paralytic power supply, and tackle it, because without stable power supply, will still remain, will still be begging investors to come, to Nigeria to come and invest, and they will not come. Will still be begging, industrialists to come to Nigeria, and they will not come. So we need the government, to be able to look deeply into Why we have had this perennial, challenge of epileptic and paralytic, power supply. Roads. There are many places that cannot be accessed now because of the roads. The roads, some of them were done before they have been washed off, by rains, and so on and so forth. The government must look into this area. Critical infrastructure, very, very key. Roads, rail, power supply, and so on and so forth. So I want to charge Nigerians, to exercise some level of patience, and secondly, to be able to, exhibit some tendency of optimism, a confidence in what is going to, in this economy. And let's see within the next 3 months, the next 6 months, before begin to now measure, begin to now measure, the success or the failure, of this EightPoint agenda. Till we meet, and we are going to be taking, this EightPoint agenda bit by bit. We'll give them 3 months or 6 months, taking them bit by bit to look at, how they have succeeded in ending poverty, how they have succeeded or failed in ending food insecurity, how they have succeeded in the area of fighting corruption, and in the eight priority areas. Until we meet again, I remain your anchor, Dr. Iruru Stephen, is to please subscribe to our page on YouTube, and promise to be giving you, real substance, of intellectual discourse. Until we meet, in our next, section. Thank you very much.